She poured water on a black woman at a private club. She had no idea who she was dealing with. My name is Renata Ose, and I want to tell you about the week I came back to the city that raised me. Not because it was triumphant, not because everything went the way I planned, but because something happened in a private lounge on a Tuesday evening that I still think about when I need to remind myself why the work matters. Let me back up. I had been gone from Veston for 11 years. I left when I was 19, a girl from the West District with a second-hand suitcase and a scholarship letter. I had read so many times the paper had gone soft at the folds. I came back as a federal healthcare compliance investigator, 30 years old, carrying a lot of files. Nobody knew that second part. That was the point. I landed on a Wednesday afternoon, rented a silver sedan at the airport, and drove myself in from the highway. No car service, no assistant, just me and the city unfolding through the windshield, and the particular mix of familiar and strange that comes with returning to a place you loved before you understood what it cost you. The trees on Caldwell Avenue were bigger than I remembered. There was a new development along the waterfront, 3 coffee shops where there used to be 1 hardware store. And then I turned onto Morrow Street, which runs through the West District where I grew up, and I stopped at a red light and looked to my left. The community health center was closed. Not just closed, boarded. The kind of boards you put on a building when you are not coming back to it. The chain-link fence around the property had orange warning tape on it, and there was a white sign zip-tied to the fence with a rendering of glass and steel, and a green logo I recognized immediately. Alden Health. Coming soon. I sat at that red light for a long time after it turned green. The car behind me beeped once. I pulled forward. Here is what you need to understand about Alden Health. On the surface, it was a success story. A regional hospital network that had expanded from 1 clinic 20 years ago to 14 facilities across the state. The kind of company that got written up in business magazines. The kind of company whose name went on buildings and charity galas and university endowments. Harlan Alden, the CEO, was 58 years old. He had silver hair and a firm handshake, and the practiced warmth of someone who had spent decades making people feel seen in the 30 seconds before he forgot their name. He had donated enough to local causes that his photograph appeared in almost every arts center lobby in Veston. He had a quote on the wall of the pediatric wing at Mercy General, something about healing being a community act. I had read everything about him. I had also read everything that did not appear in articles. The reason I was back in Veston was a man named Desmond Fitch. Desmond had been the internal chief financial officer for Alden Health's regional division for 9 years, before he was quietly moved to a position with no budget authority and no direct reports. The move came 3 weeks after he declined, for the 4th time, to sign a financial summary he believed contained falsified billing codes. He had reached out to my office 8 months ago through a contact we both trusted, and he had kept records, not on a server, not in a shared drive, in a shoebox. Actual handwritten notes, dated, initialed, stored in his home. 9 years of watching how numbers moved inside a company that billed Medicare for procedures at complexity levels that did not match the actual care delivered. The difference between what Alden Health charged and what the treatment actually cost was not a rounding error. It was a system. It had been built carefully and maintained deliberately. We met at his hotel on Thursday evening, not somewhere flashy, a mid-tier business hotel off the interstate. The kind of place with beige carpets and a continental breakfast, and no one paying attention to who comes and goes. He sat across from me at the small desk in his room and slid the shoebox across the surface without ceremony. 9 years, he said. I kept telling myself someone else would notice. I opened the lid. The notes were organized by quarter, each section clipped together and labeled in neat block print. The man was meticulous in the way that people become meticulous when they know, somewhere underneath, that what they are witnessing is not going to be fixed quietly. Okay, I need to pause right here, because what happened next is the thing that changed what this case meant to me personally. I went through the first 3/4 of records, and I found a billing code discrepancy for a patient who had been treated at the West District location. The patient's identifying information was redacted in Desmond's notes, The way you redact it when you are not sure yet who will see these pages. But the file number was there. It matched a number I had seen in my mother's house, in a folder my mother kept in a kitchen drawer labeled, in her handwriting, Daddy's hospital stuff. My father, Kwame Osei, had been a community health worker for 23 years. He had spent his career going door to door in the West District, connecting people to services, helping families navigate paperwork, driving elderly patients to appointments when no one else would. He had been a patient at the Alden Health Facility on Morrow Street in the last 14 months of his life. And what I was looking at, in that shoebox, in that beige hotel room, was a record showing that his billing code had been inflated. A routine management procedure documented as a high-complexity intervention, charged to Medicare at the higher rate. The difference, $2,100. They had billed Medicare for a version of my father's illness that was more profitable than his actual illness. I set the page down. Desmond was watching me. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew what the file number was. He had figured it out before the meeting. He had let me read it myself because he understood, I think, that some things need to be arrived at without someone else's hand on your shoulder. I pressed my lips together. I looked at the wall for a moment. Then I picked up my pen and kept going. That is not heroism. That is just what the work requires. But I want you to know it cost something. 2 days before my meeting with Desmond, I had stopped at a convenience store on Morrow Street to buy water. It was early evening. A woman in scrubs was standing outside the entrance, talking on her phone. Her voice was low, but she was not trying to hide the conversation. They changed the code again, she said. 3rd time this month. I don't know what I'm supposed to sign anymore. I looked at her. She did not look at me. She ended the call and went inside. I filed it away. I did not know her name yet. The next part of what I need to tell you requires some context about Harlan Alden's daughter. Courtney Alden was 28 years old. She had grown up in a house where problems were managed rather than solved, where the phone calls that made inconveniences disappear were made from a home office with a view of the harbor, and where the definition of the word consequence applied to other people. She was conventionally stunning in the way that appeared well in photographs and badly in depositions, which she had not yet had occasion to discover. She moved through Veston's social landscape with the certainty of someone who had never been required to consider whether the landscape was designed to include her specifically or just happened to accommodate her. She had her father's ability to fill a room. She had not inherited whatever it was that came after that. There was also Troy Alden. Troy was Harlan's younger brother, 52 years old. His title was Director of External Affairs, which was a polished way of saying that he was the person who made sure unfavorable situations did not become public situations. He had been doing this for Alden Health for 18 years. He was very good at it. He worked through systems, licensing boards, political contacts, the particular bureaucratic pressure that could be applied to anyone who depended on a regulatory process. 3 days after I arrived in Veston, I received an email from an address I did not recognize. The email informed me that my federal compliance certification was under review, that 2 complaints had been filed with my licensing board, that I might want to consider whether the Veston engagement was the right use of my expertise at this particular time. My technical contact traced the IP origin to a private office suite in downtown Veston. Troy Alden's name was on the lease. I forwarded the email to Vivienne Okafor's office and went back to work. Okay, I want to be honest with you for a second. There was a moment, that same evening, when I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and I thought about leaving. Not because I was afraid of Troy Alden, not because of the email, but because I had opened Desmond's records and found my father's file number, and the weight of that had landed somewhere in my chest and not moved since. I thought about the fact that my father had gone through the right channels, had trusted the systems, had lost everything for it, had died 4 years before anyone said publicly that he had been right. I thought, what if I spend the next 4 years of my life on this, and it still does not land the way it should? I sat there for a while. Then I picked up the shoebox from the desk. I opened it. I looked at Desmond's handwriting, 9 years of dates and initials and carefully noted irregularities. I thought about what it cost him to keep showing up and writing things down when no one was asking him to. I put the box back on the desk. I opened my laptop. I went back to work. Vivienne Okafor was 57 years old. She had been appointed director of the Federal Healthcare Compliance Bureau 14 months ago. Before that, she had spent 19 years doing this same work at the state level. She was the person I had called when Desmond first reached out. She was the person who had built the team around me, and she was the person who, 14 months ago when she took the federal role, had already identified Alden Health as a priority case. She was flying into Veston on Friday evening. We were going to meet at the Harbourview Club. The Harbourview Club was a private resort and spa on the north side of the harbour. The kind of place with thick towels and a member directory and a sommelier who remembered your preference without being asked. I had been a premium member for 3 years, which is a detail that always surprises people who have decided in advance what a woman from the West District of Veston is likely to have access to. I arrived at 7:45. Vivienne was due at 8. I found a chair in the lounge, ordered sparkling water, and settled in to wait. I was wearing a dark blazer, simple trousers, low heels. My watch, the one I wore to every field appointment, was on my left wrist. It had a gesture-activated recording function that I had set up 2 years ago, after a source meeting in a different city went badly, and I had no documentation of what was said. One specific movement of my left hand activated it. The audio uploaded automatically to a secure federal server. I had not planned to use it that evening. I do not always plan to use it. That is sort of the point. I was reviewing notes on my phone when I felt the room shift. There is a particular quality of attention that follows certain people. Not universal attention. Not the kind that comes from doing something dramatic. The kind that comes from years of walking into rooms with the assumption that the room would orient itself around you. Courtney Alden arrived with 3 friends. All of them dressed for a social event that required visible effort. She was in white. Her friends were in the colors that orbit white at parties like this one. They were laughing at something that had probably not been funny 30 seconds ago. The kind of ongoing performance of ease that signals anything but. The host greeted Courtney by name. She accepted this as weather. She surveyed the lounge the way her father surveyed a boardroom. Not obviously. But I caught the inventory she ran. The quick categorizing glance that moved from table to table, assessing, filing, dismissing. It stopped on me. I returned my attention to my phone. Courtney and her friends settled 2 tables over. Champagne was ordered. A conversation started that was slightly louder than necessary. The kind of conversation that is designed to be witnessed rather than had. I kept reading. 10 minutes passed. The comment, when it came, was not directed at me directly. It was the kind of remark that floated into the air of a room without an owner. The kind that could be walked back if necessary and enjoyed in the meantime. Something about whether the club had changed its membership standards. One of her friends made a sound of agreement. I did not respond. A few minutes later, Courtney stood. I tracked the sound of her chair on the tile without looking up. 4 steps across the floor. She stopped at the edge of my table. I don't want to make this awkward. Her voice was pleasant, precise. The voice of someone who had been told her whole life that she was well-spoken. But this section is for club members only. There may have been a mix-up at the front. I looked up. No mix-up, I said. I belong here. A small flicker moved across her face. Recalibration. My mistake, she said, without moving. Do you have a card? I don't need one, I said. They have my name. She turned to the nearest staff member. A young man who had gone very still in the way that hospitality workers go still when they recognize a situation developing. She asked him, in a tone that made it sound like she was doing him a favor, to confirm the membership status of the guest at this table. He checked his tablet. He confirmed it. 3-year premium member. Courtney received this information without visible reaction. She thanked him. She looked back at me. She sat down in the chair across from me without being invited. My father built the children's wing at Mercy General, she said. Her voice had shifted into something conversational. Friendly, almost. Did you know that? He really cares about this community. I looked at her. I thought about the file number in Desmond's shoebox. I thought about the billing code. I thought about $2,100. Something in my face must have changed, because Courtney read it as victory. She reached across the table, picked up my glass of sparkling water, and poured it slowly, deliberately, across the back of my hand. She held eye contact the entire time. The lounge went completely silent. I looked down at my hand. I looked at the water spreading across the white tablecloth. And then, without thinking about it, without planning it, I did what I always do when I need to center myself. I pressed my left hand flat against the table, and I closed my fingers inward against my palm. Once, the watch activated. Courtney did not know this. She was watching me with the expression of someone waiting for a reaction that would confirm the order of things she had always understood to be true. Her friends had gone quiet. One of them had a phone out, angled downward, in a way that suggested they were also recording, which I noted without concern. I looked up at Courtney. "Thank you," I said. She stared at me. "That's it? You're just going to sit there?" I picked up a linen napkin from the table and dried my hand. Slowly, I set the napkin back down. I folded my hands in my lap. "I'm waiting for someone," I said. 30 seconds later, Vivienne Okafor walked through the door. Vivienne did not look like someone who had just flown in from the capital. She looked like someone who had been awake for 30 hours and had made peace with that fact somewhere over the state line. Dark blazer, low heels, hair pulled back in the way of a woman who had long since stopped trying to make her hair look intentional and arrived instead at the stage where it simply looked right. She walked through the lounge without slowing down. She did not look left or right. She moved directly to my table, set her leather portfolio on the surface, and sat across from me as though we had arranged exactly this, in exactly this chair, at exactly this time. "Which, to be fair, we had, Renata," she said. "Vivienne," I said, "thank you for coming." She glanced at the water on the tablecloth, at the napkin I had folded to the side. She did not comment on it. She opened her portfolio. "The warrant was signed at 6 this evening," she said quietly. "The team is staged. We can move on the records tonight or hold until Monday, depending on where Desmond is with the final documentation." "He's ready," I said. "We're ready." Vivienne nodded once and uncapped her pen. Courtney had not moved. She was standing 3 feet away, still holding the empty water glass. Her friends had gone silent behind her. I did not look at her. I did not need to, but I heard the sound she made. Not a word, something smaller. The sound of a person who has walked confidently into a room and realized, too late, that the room was not what she thought it was. One of her friends leaned in and whispered something. Courtney did not answer. She was looking at Vivienne Okafor. I knew what she was doing. She was running the inventory she always ran. She was assessing, filing, looking for the category that explained who this woman was, what she represented, whether she was a threat or an irrelevance. The thing about Vivienne is that she did not give you a category. She simply gave you the weight of 30 years of consequential decisions made in difficult rooms, and you either recognized what that weight looked like or you did not. Courtney recognized it. She walked to the far side of the lounge. She pulled out her phone. I did not hear what she said, but I knew who she was calling. Vivienne spread 3 pages across the table between us. I looked at them. She talked. I listened. Around us, the lounge continued its quiet business, glasses being refilled, conversations continuing in the low register of people who understood that something was happening nearby that they did not yet understand, and that the not understanding was somehow more alarming than the thing itself. We sat there for 40 minutes. When I finally left the Harborview Club that evening, the warrant had been confirmed, the timeline had been set, and 52 seconds of audio from my watch had been uploaded, time-stamped, and logged as Evidence Exhibit 47 in a federal compliance case that had been building for 14 months. Courtney's voice was on it, her exact words about her father, his name, his charity, his care for the community. The recording did not prove she knew what her father had done, but it was going to make certain questions very difficult to avoid. The public hearing was held on a Thursday in October, in the Civic Hall on the north end of downtown Veston. The room seated 300. Every seat was taken before 9 in the morning. Harlan Alden arrived with his legal team and a communications director who had been managing his public image for 11 years. He wore a dark blue suit, Alden Health's color. He stopped at the entrance to speak with supporters who had gathered on the steps, pressing flesh, accepting handshakes, conducting the performance of a man who is facing a misunderstanding rather than a reckoning. He was given 15 minutes to address the committee. He used all of them. He characterized the investigation as politically motivated. He used the phrase coordinated attack twice and reform agenda once. He spoke about his record of community investment, about the facilities his company had built, about the jobs Alden Health had created. He was, in terms of pure delivery, very good. His voice was steady. His pauses landed in the right places. He made eye contact with the committee members in the front row and with the cameras positioned at the back of the room. In the gallery, people nodded. Then I stood up. I presented for 52 minutes. I do not use theatrics. I have appeared before enough oversight bodies to know that the most durable presentations are also the most restrained. No raised voice, no dramatic reveals, just the documents, the dates, the codes, the dollar amounts, laid out in the sequence that made the pattern undeniable. I went through 6 Medicare billing contracts. I identified each shell company in the routing structure. I traced every payment from its origin code through its processing path to its endpoint. I named 14 individuals. I identified each person's relationship to Alden Health's leadership. The screens above the committee table showed internal billing records, ordinary records, written in the unguarded language of people who trust that no one outside the room will ever read them. At the 40-minute mark, 2 committee members who had begun the session with visible skepticism had stopped looking skeptical, and then I introduced the final witness. I want to tell you about Nurse Adeze Nwosu. She was not a compliance investigator. She was not an attorney. She was not a federal official of any kind. She was a charge nurse at Alden Health's newest West District facility, the one that had been built on the footprint of the old community health center on Morrow Street. She came to the hearing directly from a night shift. She was still in her scrubs. She sat at the witness table and set a manila folder in front of her, and did not look nervous, because she was not nervous. She was tired. There is a difference, and the room understood it. She had 47 screenshots on her phone, printed and organized by date. Each one showed a patient billing code before and after it had been modified in the Alden Health system. Each one had a handwritten note in the margin in her own script, documenting the original code, the changed code, and the reason she knew the change was incorrect. The committee chair asked her how long she had been collecting these. 14 months, she said. He asked what she intended to do with them. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't know, she said. I just didn't want to be the only one who knew. The room was very still. Let me tell you something. I have sat in a lot of hearing rooms. I have watched a lot of witnesses testify. And what Adeze Nwosu said in that moment, in that tired, matter-of-fact voice, after a night shift, in her work clothes, was the sentence that cut through everything. Not the legal arguments. Not the financial analysis. Not the federal warrant. Just, I didn't want to be the only one who knew. The committee chair asked her a few more questions. She answered each one clearly and specifically. She did not editorialize. She did not gesture toward larger meaning. She simply told the truth in the way that people tell the truth when they have been holding it carefully for a long time and have finally found the right place to set it down. Then came Yolanda Reeves. Yolanda had worked as an administrative assistant to Harlan Alden's senior staff for 3 years before resigning without explanation 18 months ago. She was 36. She carried a tablet in a protective case and connected it to the room's display system without being asked. What she presented was a series of internal emails from Alden Health's executive suite. Not the polished external communications, the real ones. The language in them was specific, clear. It directed, in detail, the mechanism by which billing codes would be adjusted to maximize reimbursement rates. One email contained a phrase that stopped the room. Handle this the same way we managed the Lake Regional accounts. I had presented the Lake Regional billing irregularities in the first hour of my presentation. The circle closed. Harlan Alden sat at the respondent's table. He did not move for a long time after the email appeared on screen. Then he turned to his attorney. His attorney leaned in. A recess was requested. The recess was granted. Harlan walked out of the civic hall with his legal team around him. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at his daughter. Courtney had come. She had dressed carefully. She sat in the third row of the gallery beside her mother's sister, who had driven up that morning and who had spent the 2-hour drive, I later learned, saying very little. Courtney watched her father speak. She watched me present. She watched the screens fill with emails and billing codes and dollar amounts and names, some of which she recognized. She recognized the name of her Uncle Troy's consulting division. She had known it did work with Alden Health. Her father had mentioned it as a good example of family investing in the community. She recognized some of the dates. They corresponded to conversations she half remembered, references she had filed away without examining. She sat very straight through all of it. When the recess was called, she walked to the nearest restroom and ran cold water over her wrists and looked at her face in the mirror for a long time. I know this because she told me later. 2 weeks after the hearing, Harlan Alden was indicted on 9 counts of Medicare fraud, contract manipulation, and obstruction of justice. 3 other Alden Health executives were indicted alongside him. Troy Alden attempted to negotiate a separate cooperation agreement. Vivian's office declined. Troy's own exposure was sufficient for an independent prosecution. The email trail that ran through his office was not going to disappear because he offered to explain it. Petra Sabo, the internal auditor who had quietly flagged concerns about the Lake Regional accounts 19 months ago and received a formal reprimand for it, received a public commendation from Vivian's office. Her personnel file was corrected. Desmond Fitch received a letter from the Federal Compliance Bureau formally acknowledging that his reassignment had been retaliatory and that his record of conduct had been exemplary throughout his 9 years in the role. There was no remedy for 9 years of being sidelined for doing his job correctly, but there was at least that. The truth, written down somewhere official. Adaise Nwosu was asked to serve as a community advisor to the state panel drafting new billing oversight protocols. She said yes. She did not issue a statement. She went back to her shift the next morning, the same as any other morning. About 10 days after the hearing, I got a message through a city official I knew peripherally. Courtney Alden wanted to meet. No explanation. I said yes. We met at a place called Morrow Bakery, which was a small shop on the west end of Morrow Street that had been there since before I was born. The kind of place with a glass case and mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu and no ambience whatsoever, which is the best possible kind of place to have a conversation that matters. I arrived first, ordered coffee, sat in the corner booth near the window. She came in 5 minutes later. She had dressed plainly. No performance. She sat down across from me and ordered nothing, then changed her mind and ordered coffee she did not drink. She looked at me for a moment. I didn't know, she said. Or I don't know. Maybe I chose not to know. A pause. I keep asking myself if those are different things. Ethically. I looked at her. I thought about a lot of things in that moment. I thought about Desmond and his shoebox. I thought about Adaise standing outside a convenience store on a Tuesday evening saying I don't know what I'm supposed to sign anymore. I thought about my father, and a billing code, and $2,100. That question, I said, the one you're asking yourself, that is the only place to start. She looked down at her coffee. She looked out the window. The old community health center site was 2 blocks from where we were sitting. The Alden Health sign had been removed from the fence. I did not know when it had come down or who had taken it. Neither of us said anything for a while. I did not push her toward a conclusion. She was 36 days into understanding something about her life that was going to take considerably longer to absorb. That was enough for now. That was the beginning of something, even if neither of us could see its shape yet. I drove out of Veston on a Friday morning. I went through the West District on the way to the highway. Old habit. I slowed on Morrow Street. The boarded building was still there. The fence was still up, but the Alden Health sign was gone, and whatever came next had not yet announced itself. The lot was just a lot. The building was just a building. Both of them waiting. I thought about my father. I thought about him the way I often think about him. Not as someone I lost, but as someone who showed me what it looked like to keep going when the channels that were supposed to protect you failed to do so. He had gone to the right people, and the right people had not been right. He had kept going anyway. He had paid for it in ways I was still learning to account for. I thought about his name in Desmond's records. I thought about the $2,100. I thought about the fact that the system had taken money from him while he was dying, and that no one who authorized that decision had considered for a single moment what it meant to the man on the other side of the billing code. But I also thought about something else. I thought about Adiez in her scrubs at that witness table. About 47 screenshots on a phone, collected over 14 months. By a woman who did not know what she was going to do with them. Who kept them anyway, because she did not want to be the only one who knew. That is what the work looks like from the inside. It does not look like triumph. It does not look like a moment. It looks like a woman on a Tuesday evening standing outside a convenience store, on her phone after a long shift, not knowing yet that she is already part of the answer. I turned on the radio when I reached the on-ramp. I only let myself do that when I'm leaving somewhere. The highway opened in front of me, long and flat and bright in the morning light. Here is what I want you to take with you. Power does not make you untouchable. It makes your choices louder. And the loudest thing Harlan Alden ever did was not the fraud itself. It was the everyday assumption that no one in that billing department, no one in those hallways, no one sitting alone in a lounge at the Harborview Club would ever matter enough to be the thing that brought it all down. He was wrong about all of them. Adiez mattered. Desmond mattered. Yolanda mattered. My father mattered. And the work does not require that you be remembered for it. It only requires that it be done.